Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Monday, July 12th, 2021. On today's episode, we're going to discuss the latest film and TV news. The Slash Film Editorial Director Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
So not much has actually happened in the world of movies since you last heard from us on Friday. But one thing did happen. Black Widow came out in theaters, and that box office report is very interesting. We're going to dive into it in today's episode. It's going to be a shorter episode. But Ben, tell us about the Black Widow's performance.
Yeah, Black Widow actually did better than F9 last week. It debuted to $80 million domestically at the box office, and then it also pulled in an additional $78 million internationally. So that's $158 million for those of you who are keeping score at home.
Yeah, and our headline on Slash Film was Black Widow smashes pandemic box office records with the biggest opening since Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. So is everything returning to normal, Ben? Is this a good sign that the theatrical business, we were all kind of doom and gloom during the pandemic. Right. We were all like saying, because all this Premiere Access was popping up, Warner Brothers is going to HBO Max Direct, and we were kind of like, oh, this is bad for movie theaters. Is this a good sign that isn't the case?
I mean, it's a better sign, right? Like we're on the way there, but we're not fully there yet. Like the past few Marvel Studios movies that debuted, like in our article, we have that Spider-Man: Far From Home made $185 million in its debut weekend, and this just made 80 domestically. So there's a long way to go before we get back to pre-pandemic numbers, even for literally the biggest blockbusters that Hollywood is making right now with these MCU projects. I was going
to say 80 million for a Marvel movie. 80 million sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot in terms of the MCU. Like to give you an idea, I think that's like in the top or the bottom of like 5 or 6 of the Marvel movies. And there's been a lot of them. It's, only 15 million above Thor, which came out 10 years ago. So
yeah, my favorite thing, and you may have queued this up for us to talk about later, but Disney sent out this big press release that has, all these breakdowns of how the movie did. And my favorite thing in the entire Disney press release was that Black Widow's opening is the highest domestic opening weekend for a Marvel Cinematic Universe origin story after Black Panther and Captain Marvel. It's like, I know you don't care about sports, Peter, but sometimes if you're watching, I don't know, a baseball game or something, and there's not really anything going on, the announcers, it's clear to me that they just have their teams during lulls in the action, they just have their teams just crunching numbers, statistics and stuff. And they'll be like, wow, that's the first time that this has happened on a Tuesday while the temperature is over 75 degrees since 1941. All these different caveats, have to go into this number. So I just love the Disney Marvel spin machine there, trying to make this seem like a bigger deal than it is.
Oh, I didn't even look at this press release, but looking at the numbers, that doesn't seem to add up. Is that the worldwide number?
I believe so, yes.
Oh, okay.
And there's a Disney Plus component to it, which I'm sure we'll talk about soon.
Yeah. Oh, so they're adding that into the equation. Because I was going to say, this is 5 million below Doctor Strange, which came out 5 years ago, which, I mean, isn't bad. This is in line with Ant-Man and the Wasp. It did 5 million more than Ant-Man and the Wasp. And that was an established character. So,
right.
So is this bad? If we weren't coming off a pandemic, would this number be bad?
Man, I don't know. It's kind of a tough. If we weren't, man, I mean, Peter, honestly, I can't even fathom what that scenario would look like, because the entire MCU, well, not the entire, but phase 4 of the MCU as we know it would not exist, right? Like if we weren't coming off a pandemic, this would have been the first thing that people would have seen after Spider-Man: Far From Home. And we wouldn't even have gotten any of the Disney Plus TV shows yet. And we're already, almost 3 full shows into that run with the release of this movie. So the Marvel landscape is in such a drastically different place. I don't even know how I would define what was a success in this fake scenario that you lay out.
Yeah, on one hand, I want to say, in the optimistic point of view, I'm like, Ant-Man and the Wasp did $75 million on opening weekend, and that's $5 million less than this, and that was an established character. So I mean, this is better than that. So, this would be better, but I don't know. I feel like Black Widow has been, in these movies since Iron Man 2. That's over 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it should be high. I mean, it definitely should be higher because there's obviously additional revenue streams, which we'll get to in a minute. And if that wasn't available, maybe this number would be higher.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get to some other stuff, I wanted to say, let's look at the box office for 2021 as a whole. So the opening weekend of A Quiet Place Part 2, I think like that was the first big one coming out of the pandemic. Or actually, no, probably Godzilla versus Kong.
Actually, yeah, I remember there being a lot of talk about that.
Yeah. So there was A Quiet Place. There was Fast 9, Godzilla versus Kong, Cruella, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. But, even if you look at A Quiet Place Part 2, that opening weekend was $47 million. But, I'm sure that movie was made for a lot less money than Black Widow. Yeah. So I don't know. I hope that it's recovering. I hope that we get back to normal. But okay. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that is this Premier Access number that Disney has released. And so basically, Black Widow is available in theaters, but it was also available day and date for Disney Plus subscribers on Premier Access, and you could pay an extra. What was it? I
think it was $30.
$30.
Yeah.
So about the price of like 2 movie tickets in Los Angeles. And Disney actually, when they sent out this press release, when they actually made these announcements, they actually gave out the Disney Plus number, which is 60 million, which, by the way, number one, I didn't think Disney would actually announce a Disney Plus number because they don't need to, right? Number two, I thought if they did announce a Disney Plus number, maybe they would announce it the next week, because then you have like, this big, Black Widow came out and it's the biggest movie since Rise of Skywalker at the box office. You have that positive spin, and then like next week you can announce like this big Disney Plus number, and you get 2 waves of like, we won 2 times. But it seems to me the fact that they had to group this in with the theatrical number in this press release makes me think that they're not happy with this theatrical number.
I don't know. I kind of wonder how much of it is like just them wanting to kind of justify the fact that they screwed up by not making a Black Widow movie 8 years ago or something, they're, what I'm saying? Like I feel like, and I guess maybe we'll talk about this.
By the way, we know why that is. It wasn't because of Disney. It was because of Ike Perlmutter.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But just the idea of there's a little bit of a sense to me anyway, and I'm sure other people disagree with this, but to me, it sort of feels like the Black Widow movie like missed its window. There's a sense, I have that sense where I feel like this would have made a bigger impact if this happened, 5-7 years ago or something like that, like in the lead up to Avengers Endgame, instead of as sort of almost like an afterthought. So to me, all of these box office numbers and the spin and all this kind of stuff just sort of seems to me like Disney just being like, hey, this movie is a success, right? Like we made this finally, so and it did well. We're telling you that it did well. That's kind of the tone that I get from this.
Yeah, I think you nailed it by saying it should have come out before Endgame, because once you put Endgame into the equation and the fate of this character, it's like, do you really need this story? Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of people might feel that way, but I guess it did well at the box office. So maybe I'm wrong there. Okay, so the most interesting part of this is Disney touting this Disney Premier Access number that they made, and that 60 million is almost the same as the amount of money that they made in theaters. I mean, it's slightly lower. What is that, like 25% lower, maybe? something like that. I'm doing my
Peter,
quick
I
math.
can't do math on the
Yeah.
fly. What are you talking
Yeah.
about here?
But so it's almost equivalent to what they made in theaters. And that to me also feels like they're boasting about that because maybe they want to continue that revenue stream of being able to, when movies hit theaters, the studio takes a little bit more than half of that. Some of that goes to the theater. Actually, and on the first weekend, it's actually very lopsided into the studio's hand. But by the end, it ends up being about half.
Mm-hmm.
So here with Disney Premier Access, Disney takes 100% of the money.
Right.
And you'd think that they would want that because then they don't have to give money to the exhibitors. But, before this pandemic, I don't feel like there was the studios kept on pushing for this premiere VOD day and date stuff, and the exhibitors were like, no, we won't show your films.
Right.
It feels like this pandemic has kind of turned the whole thing around. And now that Disney has gotten a taste of this money, what do you think this means for the future of movies?
Yeah, I really do think that this the Disney Plus Premier Access tier is not going to go away anytime soon. We know that the HBO, like the Warner Media deal, where they're releasing all of their 2021 movies at the same time, day and date in theaters and on HBO Max, is only going to last this year. They've said multiple times, like once 2022 rolls around, that's not going to happen anymore, or at least not for every single movie. They could do it on a case-by-case basis or something. But I really think that Disney is going to stick with this for a while because Kareem Daniel, who was just promoted to the chairman of Disney Media and Entertainment, he said in this big press release, there's a quote from him that says, "Black Widow's strong performance this weekend affirms our flexible distribution strategy of making franchise films available in theaters for a true cinematic experience, and as COVID concerns continue globally, providing choice to consumers who prefer to watch at home on Disney Plus." So the idea that they're basically saying, like, look, this, we're right in making this decision. I don't know if they're talking to exhibitors here, if they're just asking them to read between the lines, if they're just talking to the industry at large, to analysts, people who pay attention to this stuff. But it seems like they're saying, especially like as long as COVID is a thing, and then maybe even beyond that, we're going to continue to do this. And of course, whether or not they continue to do it in like a major way remains to be seen on every single, big movie or whatever. Like, I want to say that, that we wrote a story a little while ago that the next Marvel movie that comes out, which I think is Shang-Chi, is not going to do the Disney Plus thing, or maybe they haven't committed one way or another yet. I know it's going to be in theaters. Obviously, that's going to be a big deal for them, but I don't recall the specifics there. Do you remember, Peter?
Yeah, they said it remains to be seen if Shang-Chi is going to go to theaters, definitely, but it remains to be seen if they'll do premiere access.
Yeah, so I don't know. After this, and like you said, they made $60 million through Premiere Access and $80 million in the domestic box office. That's a pretty decent split. And if they're touting in this press release, hey, this works, why wouldn't they continue to do it?
Yeah, I don't know. It really makes me wonder. Like you bring up during the pandemic, and I think it's a smart strategy to keep this game plan around while COVID is still a very big thing. But what about after? I mean, in the theoretical world where we don't have to worry about COVID anymore, Ben, like, do you think Disney is going to stop doing these premiere access?
Well, I mean, I guess that's presupposing there is a world where we no longer have to worry about COVID, which I realize kind of sounds bleak, but
hey,
I don't know.
Even the Avengers had a post-snap world, so
I mean, that's true. But I honestly do not know how long it's going to be. Considering, again, I'm not like an epidemiologist. Please don't trust me. I have not even read that many articles about this, but just the idea, the sense that I get, and please maybe like send us an email if you know data that speaks contrary to this. But the sense that I get is that, like, with the vaccination campaign sort of leveling off and these variants, making the rounds, like COVID could be with us in some form for the foreseeable future. Like, I think if we were to talk about a post-COVID scenario, I don't even know how many years out in the future we would have to be talking to even imagine a time when it has been completely eradicated and is no longer a threat, on any level.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Like, will
Well, okay, I don't want to say at any level, but on a level that would stop people from going to movie theaters. Do you know what I mean? Like, because obviously I think this is going to be something we're going to have to worry about for many years to come. But
right.
Have you gone back to the movie theater yet?
I did. I went to see F9 in an IMAX theater.
Oh, yeah.
That was my big return. I have not been back since. That was the only one that I did.
Yeah. So I feel like you are one of the more cautious people I know. And if you're going back, then I feel like many people are more comfortable to go back. And the fact that all these people, half the people, or I don't want to say half the people, because like a $30 premiere access is about the cost of 3 tickets at the actual national average.
Yeah.
So, you could have one person renting it, or you could have a family of 5 or 6. You don't know. But I don't know. I'm very curious to see how this turns out. I know Disney before the pandemic was so against the idea of day and date. Like they were actually like one of the only studios that was making a ton of money from the theatrical experience and wanted to keep that revenue stream that way. I'm very curious to see how this turns out. I was doing some research while you were talking, and I was wondering, is this the biggest VOD release of all time for like the first week? And I couldn't find an answer for this, but Forbes, Scott Mendelson, he says it certainly set a record for VOD revenue for a single title, although it still pales compared to, say, the 96 million domestic opening week that the VHS debut of Aladdin and the King of Thieves, which brought Robin Williams back as the genie in August 1996. If we go by straight $30 per lease worldwide, that's 2 million Disney Plus households that would have had to pay extra to watch Black Widow at home instead of, or along with the theatrical exhibition. So that's on par with an average of 2.23 million domestic viewers per episode of like CW's The Flash during season 6. I don't know. Anyways, it's interesting. I'm curious to see how this whole thing evolves and shakes out. I don't want to be all doom and gloom and worry about the future, but this number is very, both the numbers are actually kind of exciting to me, that people are still willing to go to theaters to see these movies. I wonder if we're going to see those numbers on like the middle end of movies, not just the high end blockbusters. Are people?
Yeah, that's the thing, is like, I think, there's a difference between being doom and gloom and then having like a healthy, curiosity and sort of maybe like perverse, almost like voyeuristic look at like what is actually going on here. And I think it's still too early for anybody to make any sort of grand proclamations about the return of cinema or the death of cinema, one way or the other. We're still in this weird middle period where, like, arguably the biggest movies on the planet are pulling in 80 million domestically. And I wonder what that looks like in 6 months, 9 months, a year from now. Like, are those numbers going to continue to rise? Are they going to continue to stay stagnant like this? And are the Disney Plus numbers going to still be a big factor here? Lots of questions left.
I mean, this is all anecdotal, but, I've been talking a lot to like some of my friends who are not film fanatics or not part of film Twitter, and they're all like, oh, we love this. We don't want to, I hope all the big movies do this so I can just watch it at home. And like, part of me is like, oh no, this is the beginning of the end. But anyways, okay. You can read more about this on slashfilm.com. You can find Slash Film Daily on Apple, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends, spread the word, and we'll see you tomorrow.